Well, good morning. We come to Psalm 63, and before I read it to us this morning, I just want to set it in its context. It's a psalm ascribed to being of David, written at a time when David is once again on the run, fleeing, and in the desert of Judah. So you've got to picture a very arid landscape, and the thing that he's on the run from is most likely his own son, Absalom, who wants the throne and wants David dead. And this is a psalm born out of that time, and it's surprising. Psalm 63. You, God, are my God. Earnestly I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you, in a dry and parched land where there is no water. I've seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I'll praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will be satisfied as with the richest of foods. With singing lips my mouth will praise you. On my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night, because you are my help. I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you. Your right hand upholds me. Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become the food for jackals. But the king will rejoice in God. All who swear by God will glory in him, while the mouths of liars will be silenced. Psalm 63 talks about what it is to thirst. And it occurred to me just the other night, I don't think I've ever really been thirsty. Heidi and I were watching a film directed by Peter Weir called The Way Back. It's a film that tells the story of 7 prisoners who break out of a Russian Siberian prison, a gulag, in 1941 and hike all the way to India. Over 6,500 kilometres they walk through the Gobi Desert, across the Himalayas. And the scene in the Gobi Desert when they are thirsting is horrendous. What it is, not to just kind of like a drink, but to have no water. The dry mouth, the swollen tongue, the cracked lips, the yearning for just anything that would satiate the thirst. And the psalmist writes and says that that's how he feels towards God. He has this deep thirst after God. And not only do I wonder whether or not I've ever really thirsted, I wonder if I've ever really experienced that kind of deep hunger and yearning for God that Psalm 63 describes. See, what is this thirst that he has? Well, it's clearly his desire to know God. You notice in verse 1 he says, you, God, are my God, and I earnestly seek you. And then he describes this seeking and this earnestness that he has for God as this thirst, that in this place where nothing else satisfies, God does. The reason he knows that is because he has a memory of what God is like. And he talks about in verse 2, I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. He remembers those times in the temple when God's people have gathered in the presence of the place where God dwells and how meaningful that is. And of course we read this, I think, at this time, and we yearn as well, don't we, for that kind of public worship, that time where we gather, where we get to think that we're not alone in our worship of God. We can remember what it is to see others gathering around us, worshipping God and praising him together. And we remember the power of God. But more than that, David remembers the very love of God. Verse 3, one of the most powerful verses. Look at it. Because your love is better than life. Let's just stop and think about that for a moment. Is that the way you understand the love of God for you? Better than your life. And of course, when we understand the context of eternity and his eternal love for us and what Christ has done for us, of course, it's true, isn't it? God's love for us is better than the momentary struggles and troubles that we might have. His love is better than life. And so David says, because of that, these lips that are dry and parched and longing, they will praise you. Hands will be uplifted. I know I will be satisfied with the richest of. I have this great confidence in this God who will protect and provide in this life and even in the life to come, the life that is eternal. You read on through this psalm and you realize David's present situation there in the desert of Judah. He says, on my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. It's like he can't get to sleep, so great is his love for God. And I wonder, has that been your experience lately or ever? What are the kind of things that make it hard to fall asleep, that roll through your mind, that keep you awake and excited and invigorated? David says that it's his love for God that's like that. Because, why? Verse 7, you are my help. God is the God that comes. Well, David wonders what will come between his relationship between himself and his son, and whether or not he'll be on the run all the time. He knows that God is the one who is on his side. He is the king's anointed. God dwells with him, and so he can sing in the shadow of his wings. He says, I'll cling to you. Your right hand upholds me. With God on his side, safe. Because not only is there God's love in those first sections of the psalm, you come to the last part, and verses 9 through 11, you see God's justice. Those who want to kill me will be destroyed. Those that are liars will be silenced. He's a God of love and a God of justice. And in the midst of all of that, David says, I yearn for you, because everything else I've yearned for doesn't satisfy. And as we move into today, perhaps that's the thought to be thinking of the most. What are the things that I thirst for? And why do I think those things will satisfy me when they never have in the past? But day after day, year after, why do I thirst in the way that I do? And why don't I thirst for God like that? Because to be satisfied is to realize what it is that God provides. And when we think of what he's provided for us in Christ, we never miss out. He's the living water that overflows, and we will always be satisfied. Because what we're made for is not to live for the things of this world, but to live for God and his glory. And David knows that. And in this psalm, he gets it. Even in the midst of a barren place, he sees the abundance and desires to live a life that glorifies God. And that's our prayer, isn't it? To be able to say with David, like in verse 1, you, God, are my God, and I earnestly seek you. Let's seek after him today and glorify him.